The El Nino-fueled storm pattern shows no signs of stopping. I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Monday, January 1st.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people. All the time, no hype.
Happy New Year! I hope you're doing great. If you liked the video, be sure and give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, write them up down below. We try to respond really quick. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. That'll get you all signed up. And then when we post the videos, you'll be notified as soon as we do it. Also, if you'd like to make a special donation, you can. Just click the heart with the $sign in it down below, the special thanks button. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. PPM, Tim Caston, RP Stovall, Coach Nate, Big Ben, Jack Harris, Our Predicament, Joe Blow, Aiden Runner, and then a little special call out here to Brandon Campshire. Very generous contribution. And then an even more special call out to Ryan Augustine for his very generous contribution. And if you don't know Ryan's a big wave charger, small wave charger, just an extraordinary surfer, a really great human being. He also has a YouTube channel. Be sure and look it up. It is Ryan Augustine. You can subscribe there to his channel and see all his great content. And with that, let's get to work. First off, we're going to take a look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We have a pair of gales producing seas partly in the northern Gulf and in the central Gulf at 25 feet, aimed at the U.S. West Coast, and energy up here, 25 feet, also aimed at the U.S. West Coast. We have a newly developing gale just west of the dateline with 28-foot seas, and that's not even counting the multiple smaller but still well-rideable swells that are starting to impact the U.S. West Coast and fading in Hawaii. There is a lot of surf either in the water or on the way with no end in sight. Exactly what we need. So let's take a quick look at current conditions. We'll start in Northern California. You know, some people say, well, Point Reyes really isn't Northern California, and you're right, it isn't. It's on the very south end of Northern California, and officially, I think Central California ends at San Francisco, but in general, we call it Northern California because the folks further north don't want their secrets and don't want their surf forecasted and don't want a bunch of people messing with them, and I certainly can appreciate that. So we call this Northern California. All right, we're looking at the Point Reyes buoy number 029. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting this buoy. The energy has been converted here from, I think it's joules into feet, so you can get a sense of how big, from a surfer's perspective, the waves will be, or the energy in all the different period bands. The graph starts up here at 33.3 seconds. That'd be just like mega long period swell. We see a tenth of a foot of that. Goes down to 5-second periods here, just pure wind chop. You can see where the multiple swells are. There's a bump here at 18 to 16 seconds. That's one swell. There's another one in the 12 to 13 second period range. There's another one in about the 10-second period range with some wind swell all intermixed. So then the trick is to try to tease out, well, what are the main swells and how high are they? You can see here, swell 1, 4.8 feet at 16.5 seconds. That's about right. That would translate into roughly 7.9 foot surf. Swell number 2, 5.4 feet at 13 seconds. Also about 7 foot surf. And actually just got out of the water and up here. The surf is maybe even a little bit bigger than that. 8 foot here, 7 foot. Yeah, that's probably about right. Kind of an interesting mix of two different, one west, one more northwest. We'll get into where all this stuff came from, but there certainly are waves. Then we go down to Southern California. This is off of San Diego, Point Loma South, Buoy 191. Same deal here. You see a little bit of energy at 20 seconds. That's the new longer period swell that's probably starting to show there. You see some 13 and 14 and 12 second period energy. I mean, a whole spread, nothing nearly as big as up north because the Channel Islands are shadowing a lot of it. But here, we'll try it this way. Primary swell, 3.1 feet at 12.9 seconds from 257 degrees. Now, the Channel Islands sort of twist the swell around. It's probably more like 280 or 285. And the secondary swell, 2.9 feet at 9.8 seconds. And there's 13 second period swell all mixed in there. But there are rideable waves in Southern California. And then finally, we go to the North Shore of Oahu, Waimea Bay buoy number 106. A bit of a break in the action now. We see 15-second period energy here. This is the same swell that is just starting to hit Northern California, those 17 and 18 second period forerunners we saw. This is the fading end of that same swell here. And then we see a bunch of 11 second period energy and lesser period wind swell. Putting it all together, primary swell, 3.3 feet at 15 seconds from 317 degrees. That's 5-foot Hawaiian surf on the North Shore. And then your secondary swell at 4 feet at 11.1 seconds from 330 degrees. That's 4-foot surf. This remnant energy from a previous swell. So everyone's getting overlapping swell trains, but it's not like a jumbled mess. It's actually reasonably rideable. All right, so where did all this energy arrive from? We're purposely ignoring this here because, and we're back to Wednesday, the 28th of December. Swell from all this, for the most part, has already impacted California and is all but gone. But a new gale started developing off Kamchatka on Wednesday evening. We see it pushing over the date line with 33-foot seas. And then, let's see, we're on Friday, Saturday, fading from there. You see the leading edge of this swell starting to hit Hawaii on Sunday. That was yesterday. There were some pretty good waves on the North Shore. And now the leading edge of that swell is making it into California. Now, before we go on, another little gale developed north of the Hawaiian Islands with 28-foot seas. Also notice another little gale off of California. This was early on Sunday with 21-foot seas. That system there faded out quickly, but swell from this is making the 13-second period energy that's hitting Northern California. And then we have our new system that is developing in the Gulf there with 25-foot seas. Those 30-plus foot seas are all aimed off to the north and of no interest. That is the main fetch. Let's see, can we get, yeah, there we go. And yet another system developing behind that. We'll get into all those details in just a second. So we have 18-second period swell or 17-second period swell hitting Northern California. We have fading 13-second period swell from a previous gale that was also impacted Hawaii. We also have a new system developing in the Gulf of Alaska. So let's get into what's to come. We'll start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up to 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a dip in the jet, a trough. We have one dip there. We have another dip right there. And what that helps do, you can almost see it right here, creates a counterclockwise flow aloft. This is up at 30,000 feet, but also down at the ocean surface. And that's the hallmark of low pressure, counterclockwise circulating air in the northern hemisphere. And that low pressure, of course, generates winds. Those winds get traction or impart energy to the ocean and create seas. Those seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, get groomed out, eventually turned into swell, and swell and hits your beach turns into surf. It all starts in the jet stream, and it all starts with a trough, so that's why we monitor this. The stronger the winds in the jet in general, the deeper the troughs, the greater the storms, the greater the surf. So we have one trough here. We know there's some sort of a gale here. There's something going on out here with a developing trough associated there. Let's put this into motion, see what happens. We see the trough continuing as we get into Tuesday. The trough over the date line, the trough number 2 starts building. Look at that big hook right there. That will support gale formation, also supported by 140 knot winds. Now look at this. It's kind of the trough on as we get into Wednesday, gets pinched, starts pushing over Northern California. Looks like that would be potential for producing some weather. big old hook right here as going into the northwestern Gulf on Wednesday. That should support yet more development. And then look at this, winds start building to, what's that, about 170 knots, pushing towards the date line. Another trough starts building as we get into Friday. Also notice a trough, some sort of a weather-producing system trying to organize here over the Pacific Northwest, pushing down towards California as we get into Saturday. Winds still building in coverage over in the far west Pacific. There you go. That looks like, if anything, those backdoor troughs, that's what they're called when they kind of fall south. In fact, let's put this into motion here. Starts up here, and as it moves over the coast, pushes south, dragging cold air from Canada with it. Maybe, just maybe, that will drop temperatures. Maybe not great for surfing-wise, but if you're looking for snow, that's exactly what you want to see. Also notice the jet really consolidated the whole way across the Pacific till about a point north of Hawaii, and then it splits, some energy going into Baja, the rest kind of taking a veer off to the north here. Jetstream still looking solid as we get a week out, split right about on the date line, but still trough, supportive of gale development, a great pattern. All right, so that's the upper atmosphere, but it takes wind blowing on the ocean surface to create waves. So let's go take a look and see what's going on at the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds from the GFS model. Here's our double-barreled low in the Gulf of Alaska. Not super strong, but producing 40-knot winds aimed at the U.S. West Coast, kind of bypassing Hawaii. But needless to say, there's yet another gale right behind with 40 to almost 45-knot winds developing. And, oh, there we go, 45-knot winds as we get into Monday night, into Tuesday. And then, boom, here we go, 55-knot winds, maybe pushing 60 knots, probably 60 knots right there as we get into Tuesday. Near hurricane force, sideband energy radiating towards Hawaii, but most of the energy taking aim on the U.S. West Coast. Also notice, let's go back just a little bit here, this developing fetch here in the Gulf of Alaska with 30 to 35-knot winds aimed at the U.S. West Coast and sort of pushing right into it. Then as we get into, even on Thursday, the gale up here in the North Gulf of Alaska, or Northwestern Gulf, continues to produce 40-knot winds. Another little baby fetch moves in with it, getting more traction, continuous swell production machine, while over on Thursday night, that'd be Thursday the 4th of January, off Japan, here comes storm number 2 with 50-knot winds getting set up, and 55-knot winds aimed right at the Hawaiian Islands, continuing as we get through Friday, and then Saturday, 50-knot winds, that's storm force winds, aimed at the U.S. West Coast over the North Dateline region, right where the low pressure bias is for this El Nino. No surprise, the storms are focused right there. Now notice the storm track is a little bit more to the north, not as ideal as it was before, but you take what you can get, and still continuing even into Monday. And then here we go, yet another storm with 55+ knot winds aimed directly at the Hawaiian Islands. So storm after storm after storm, plenty of swell. It's all a function now of local winds. So let's see what effect those storms have on the ocean surface. The GFS wave model here, we'll put this into motion. We start with our little gale off California producing 23-foot seas. So that's good for like 13 or 14 second period swell. But it's this storm up here developing in the northern Gulf of Alaska that is of interest with, what do we have? So the highest seas, 46.8 feet right there. And we think that's just the warm-up, going to 50 feet on Tuesday night, later Tuesday night to 51 feet, and then that's about the peak, down to 48 feet Wednesday morning over a solid area, all aimed off to these. You could just imagine mega swell coming into this region right in here, sometime a few days out from there. Still producing even 30-foot seas on Thursday. That one fades out. Here comes the next system. Is Hawaii the main target? Well, we're thinking so, 30 to 32-foot seas, but then it starts doing that same thing with the jet pushing most of the energy energy off to the east. 40-foot seas building to 42.8 feet on Saturday night. That's what, 6 days from now or 5 days from now? And then that one fading out. Notice the storm track is a bit further north than what we'd really want. And then a week out, here comes yet another system developing just west of the dateline with 37-foot seas. So 3 big ones forecast, all on a rather northerly track. Not so good. You know, we were liking that more southerly flow to get surf into Southern California and even down into Central America. This is going to be more north focused, targeting Canada, Pacific Northwest, probably down to about Point Conception with sideband energy into Hawaii and whatever can sneak into Southern California. So then let's go take a look at winds. Today, light offshores, light winds for at least Northern California. Hawaii modeled trades a little bit more to the northeast, not pure trades. So we get into Tuesday. Here comes the next front. South winds start building for California. Strong trades for the Hawaiian Islands, we'll say 20 knots. So we get into Wednesday. Here comes the we'll call it a northwest wind event, high pressure building in behind the low that just rammed into the coast. And you have that kind of a preferred southeasterly flow, 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday kind of looks like a blown out mess for California. Strong bit of easterly fetch off this high pressure here in between Hawaii and California, producing wind swell and also, but not a bad trade wind pattern for the Hawaiian Islands. On Friday, kind of maybe a little bit of a break here for North and Central California early, but it looks like another low trying to set up. Look at the trades, 20 knots just nuking for the Hawaiian Islands. Saturday, again, kind of a northwest blown out mess, and here comes another that north to south falling low pressure, backdoor trough supported low pressure. Trades hard blowing into the Hawaiian Islands. On Sunday, still pretty much a blown out mess for California. Trades looking okay for the Hawaiian Islands. And out on Monday, a week from now, still a mess for California and sort of a pretty light southeast flow for the Hawaiian Islands, but we see some low pressure trying to develop here just north of the Hawaiian Islands. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Rainfall and snowfall potential for California. California right here, the blue is rain, white would be snow. We're into Tuesday. Front starts pushing in, reaching down to the Golden Gate by, Tuesday late afternoon, pushing the whole way down to Point Conception, even into Southern California with a good little bit of snow for the Sierra Wednesday morning, but quickly fading out. We think there's some more building in right behind that. There we go. On Friday, this is that backdoor trough falling south. There's the main event there. Looks like pretty heavy snow indeed, all the way into Saturday afternoon, into early Sunday, and then fading out from there. And we're, there we are, a week out. High pressure, it looks to be starting to build in strong. The snow forecast dashboard for Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. We actually have some semi-interesting data here. Total accumulations, right at 36 inches. That would be good, but what's even more important is check this out here. The snow level. This is the base of Palisades, Tahoe, about 6,200 feet. This is the summit up towards the top of Granite Chief in the Palisades at right about 8,900 feet. The blues are really cold air. The white is freezing level. The gray is sleet, so 32 degrees or above, and the red would be full liquid precipitation. The good news here, look at this. After today, the freezing level falls to the base of Palisades, Tahoe, and at times goes down to 2,000 and 3,000 feet. This is what we haven't had with all previous storms up to this point. It's just been really high snow levels. Yeah, there's been some precip, but without the presence of the cold air, we have that. This is much better for producing snow, and you can see the result is, theoretically at least, much more quantity of snow and snow down at the base as well. That will help opening of some of the lower runs at Palisades Tahoe. Let's go take a look at a couple other resorts. Sugar Bowl looking pretty much exactly the same. Let's go to Kirkwood. Kirkwood, a mirror image as well. But Mammoth, what's that, about maybe 9.5 inches. With the north to south falling storm track, it looks like the Tahoe region will suck most of the moisture out of these storms before they get down to Mammoth. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, so let's go take a look at the surf forecast for a couple locations. We'll try Ocean Beach. This is our Northern California default position. We see surf in the 7-foot range falling. As we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, boom, things right back up, 17 feet, slowly working its way down into Thursday. Friday, here comes the next one with 19, probably near 20 foot. Notice these dropouts, so that suggests the presence of wind. And sure enough, you can see it right here, 27 knots, 27, 30 knot, some sort of flavor of northwest wind. So pretty much a blowout, except at the most protected locations. We'll take a look at swell sizes. Pure swell, 11 feet at 13, 14 seconds on Wednesday, Thursday, and then we're in the 10-foot at 18-second range on Friday, and then slowly fading from there, and then back to 8 to 9 feet at 14 seconds on Monday. Swell is not the issue. Local conditions are. We go down to San Diego, the same sort of pattern, but a little bit more modified. 3-foot surf, holding in the 3-foot range into Tuesday, Wednesday. New swell arrives up into the, we'll say maybe 4 to 5 foot range sort of thing on Thursday, trickling down on Friday, and then for the weekend, 4.5 feet, fading some, and then maybe a bigger pulse as we get into, Monday or so. Winds also an issue at times with these backdoor troughs. They tend to do that. Pure swell size is 2.5 feet at 11 seconds sort of thing. Picking up to maybe 2 feet at 14 to 15 seconds on Thursday. And then there's your wind swell, 4 feet at 9 seconds. And then we go to 2.5 feet at 17 to 18 seconds on Saturday. And then sort of more a wind swell thing as we get a week out at 6 feet at 11 seconds beyond. And then we go to Oahu, the North Shore, 8-foot surf, continuing through Wednesday, going up to 11 feet, basically, slowly trickling down. It's down to the 3-foot range, which is probably about chest high as we get into Sunday, and then right back up from there. Winds, not too bad. Let's see, trades all out of the east, a little bit of jumble going on there on Thursday, and then it's pretty much back to trades. Swell sizes, 5 feet at 12 seconds, 6 feet at 13 seconds, 7 feet at 15 seconds, 7 feet at 14 seconds, and just kind of continuing on. No lack of swell. We'll take it. All right, let's go take a look now at the long-term outlook. This would be, we'll say, a week and a half to 2 weeks out, going out maybe a couple of months, if not longer. The two major oscillations that affect the long-term forecast are the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, our El Nino situation that we are currently in. So first off, we're looking for signs of the MJO, specifically the active phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There's two phases to it, active phase and inactive phase. The active phase is the good one. It is like a low pressure system. The inactive phase, high pressure, not so good. The active phase is typically on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other. They rotate west to east around the planet on the equator. The active phase, when it pushes over the West Pacific, it takes about 4 to maybe 5 weeks to make its way across the Pacific, but that's what we want. The active phase, because it's like a low-pressure system, one, it takes warm, moist air down at the ocean surface in the West Pacific, lifts it, sucks it way up into the atmosphere. The jet stream captures that energy. It supercharges the jet stream, making a stronger jet stream, which digs out troughs, which makes storms, which makes surf and snow. Inactive phase does the opposite. It basically is sinking air that steals energy from the jet stream, promotes high-pressure development over the Pacific, and kind of puts a damper on both swell and storm and snow production. All right, so we're here looking at data. These are wind data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. This is the far west Pacific here. This is the east Pacific here. This is the equator right there, the date line right there. We're just looking at the arrows. The arrows, if trades are blowing hard, well, we see they're blowing moderately hard in the East Pacific, moderately hard over the Central Pacific, and now blowing pretty hard over the West Pacific. This would be, at least at face value, probably signs of the inactive phase of the MJO. But it's not the actual wind speeds that matter. It's what they call anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of the year. We see over here in the East Pacific, winds are actually out of the west. That's a good thing. That helps warm water from Kelvin waves. And, you know, those of you that have watched these videos understand what a Kelvin wave is. They are erupting to the surface right now in the East Pacific. This gets maximum warmth at the ocean surface there by dampening, mixing, or anything like that. Also, when we get over to the Central Pacific, pretty much a neutral pattern. And even in the far West Pacific, a neutral pattern. So neither an active or an inactive phase really indicated. If anything, the active phase maybe is moving from the West Pacific into the East Pacific. So what's the forecast for the next 2 weeks? This is data from the GFS model. 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, just the east-west component of the wind. You can tease active and inactive phase of the MJO from that. All right, now, but this is the whole plan on one chart. The date line's right up the middle. We know the date line is in about the mid-Pacific. Far West Pacific starts about 125 east, so right there. Okay, and California's at 120 west, but that Pacific actually goes to about 80 west, somewhere about there. Now, what's really important, though, is what we call the Kelvin wave generation area. That area in the West Pacific, because in the West Pacific, one, if you get the active phase over there, one, it steals energy, or it takes energy, warm, moist air lifts it aloft and feeds it in the jet stream. It really does most of that over the West Pacific. Two, when the active phase is over the West Pacific, if it produces those westerly anomalies like what we were looking at in the previous chart or looking for, then that can create a Kelvin wave. We'll get into that in a little bit later. But let's just have a look here. So what's happened in the past? So the official area we're interested in is 125 west, the Kelvin wave or 125 east, the Kelvin wave generation area, to about 170 west. That's where all the magic happens. Now we see here these orange and reds, these are westerly anomalies. So this would be the active phase of the MJO. It started right about the beginning of December. You can see it working its way across the Pacific, the westerly anomalies associated with that, and forecast pretty much fading out as we get to the end of the first week of January. But what we also see is strong easterly anomalies that have been over the maritime continent for the first time in maybe a year, starting to work their way over the Kelvin wave generation area, and if not the entire equatorial Pacific. So this is active phase of the MJO moving from west to east. This is the inactive phase moving from west to east. This suggests that on its face, if you saw this, you go, well, there's not going to be any storm production. But what's really going on, remember, we've had 9 active phases of the MJO since about the beginning of January of 2023. They have set up El Nino. El Nino is the default base state for the Pacific right now. So just because we have this inactive phase of the MJO setting up doesn't mean that we won't have storm production. There is a very well dug in El Nino base state over the Pacific right now. This might take a little wind out of its sails for a little bit, but only for the 4-week interval while it passes over the Pacific. Let's move on. Next up, let's look out at outgoing long wave radiation, OLR, just fancy words for cloud cover. Okay, if the active phase of the MJO is a low pressure system taking warm, moist air aloft, eventually that warm, moist air will hit cold air up high in the atmosphere and condense into clouds. Clouds are shown as blue on this chart. Okay, that means less sunlight bouncing off the ocean's surface, reflected back into space, meaning just heavier cloud cover. The reds and orange, high pressure, cloud-free skies. So this would be inactive phase of the MJO, active phase. And let's get ourselves centered here. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there, the equator right there, the date line right there, the Kelvin wave generation area right in here. So it looks like, according to this, the statistic model, the inactive phase of the MJO is setting up, forecast to make its traverse across the Pacific for the next 15 days. That'd be about 2 weeks. And there you go. You see the active phase starting to bleed into the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. Now, this is a statistic model. The dynamic model says pretty much the same thing, except on the last frame, it has the inactive phase hanging over the Kelvin wave generation area, where the statistic model says, well, it's moving out a little bit. Either way, it looks like this mega active phase of the MJO in the Indian Ocean is at some point going to make its way towards the Pacific. Here's phase diagrams for the same two models, statistic model, dynamic model. This just gives us a drill down of what's going on. How do you read the chart? The active phase moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent to the West Pacific to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. The further the dot is away from this circle here, the stronger it is. So a modest to moderate, strong active phase of the MJO moving into the central Indian Ocean over the next 2 days. Here are 3 different tracks. They have it moving to the Maritime Continent and very weak, notice, approaching the circle 2 weeks from now. The statistic model, the dynamic model, the GEFS model, only has the active phase making it to not even barely the Maritime Continent. So the statistic model has the active phase moving faster than the dynamic model. Hence, that difference that we saw, where was that? Down here, the difference in the last 2 frames. Here's an upper level model showing areas favorable for precipitation, the same sort of deal. This is probably, we believe this is a statistic model. There's South America, Central America, New Guinea there, equator right there, the date line roughly there. This goes out 40 days, 5 days a panel. See right now, pretty much a neutral pattern. It doesn't show, a little bit of dry air. That's today, January 1st. But then you see, well, come about January 18th, here comes the wet air, active phase, active phase, active phase, moving its way across the Pacific through somewhere in the mid part of February. So, if anything, our downtime is the next 2 weeks. But we just looked at a model, the wave model, the surface models, they go out a week, and they're just showing storm after storm. But note, the storm track is further to the north, right? Up more towards the north dateline region. That is probably a function of the inactive phase of the MJO setting up over the Pacific. So it's not dampening the storm track, it's just shoving it to the north. So if you're looking for a more southward storm track, probably about mid-January is when that'll happen. Active phase setting up, starting to inject more warm, moist air into the jet stream, dragging it south, and then the magic begins. Also, I do want to say, what an amazing run of surf we had over the Christmas and New Year holiday. Just storm after storm. Southern California got a whole bunch of the action too. Almost a little too much, a little bit of destruction along some coastal cities as massive waves slammed into the coast. The tow teams at Mavericks were loving it. They got some epic giant surf. Now we're moving more into the range of, well, just normal mortal surf, 10 to 15 feet instead of 40 feet. Then we go to the CFS model, the crazy forecast system, as I saw somebody post about it. So this shows, again, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. The date line runs right up the middle. Okay, Kelvin wave generation area starts at 125 east, so right there. You can see we're back in October. This clearly was an active phase of the MJO, the reds, westerly anomalies. This is this Indian Ocean dipole thing, strong eastern anomalies that were over the Maritime Continent. The dotted contour is the inactive phase. We had a little inactive phase the end of October, early November. Strong active phase the beginning of November, followed by an inactive phase. Look at the blues, your easterly anomalies. Here is our last active phase of the MJO that just occurred, fading out today south of California. Notice the easterly anomalies associated with the Indian Ocean dipole. Forecast to move into the far west Pacific pretty much today and into at least the end of January, according to this model, with westerly anomalies still lingering on the dateline. This is the beginning of the end of our current El Nino, sad to say. Now, not to freak out, El Nino well entrenched in the atmosphere. It's going to take months, like 6 to 9 months, if not longer, for all of it to fade out. So we're pretty much primed for nonstop storm activity, at least through, I would say, March, just given on the strength of this El Nino. We'll dive into that a little bit more. But you can see the beginnings of the end of El Nino starting to set up, and theoretically the beginnings of a potential La Nina pattern for next winter. Current outgoing long-wave radiation, cloud cover basically. The dateline runs right up the middle. The oranges and reds, dry air. This was last January. This was your La Nina pattern. Dry air, all the wet air over the maritime continent. You can see how the wet air slowly through last summer moved and is set up lock solid, strong over the dateline now, the center of our El Nino weather pattern, with the dry air that associated with La Nina that was over the dateline, now over the maritime continent. We have reversed from La Nina to El Nino, and then probably over the course of a year, we'll reverse back to some flavor of that pattern. So here's the forecast for outgoing long-wave radiation. The forecast is up here. What past performance is here? The dateline runs right up the middle here. Okay, you can see the oranges and reds, or yellows, dry air that is setting up, has set up over the maritime continent. Forecast holding into about the end of January, and even in some degree the whole way through the month of March. Here is your cloudy skies, your El Nino, the center of uplifting air on the dateline, creating condensation and clouds right on the dateline. Forecast holding through February and then slowly moderating. It was again to March, and then we're starting into a spring pattern. Then we go look down at the surface, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Here are your westerly winds associated with 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was many more active phases of the MJO. Here is your easterly anomalies with the Indian Ocean dipole forecast associated with, one can presume, the inactive phase of the MJO, building across the Kelvin wave generation area the first week of January. But then you see as you get into the later part of January, here come westerly anomalies again, not as strong as what we had here, and likely not generating Kelvin waves or anything like that, but just sort of reinforcing the El Nino base state in the atmosphere until we get into later March, and then it looks like another inactive phase of the MJO. In fact, let's overlay the MJO, see if we're close. There's our, let's see, 1, 2, 3 active phases of the MJO. Here's our inactive phase that's currently setting up. Forecast holding the Kelvin wave generation area till January 17th. Then the active phase goes from there the whole way into the beginning of March. That's great. And then here's another inactive phase. So typically during El Nino, at least during the forming stages, the MJO kind of dissipates and fades. And you can see back in the summer and in the spring, it was weaker. It's gotten stronger and it continues to get stronger. El Nino is maybe losing some of its grip and the MJO is starting to take over, but we have this low pass filter here. This is the El Nino base state, okay? These black contours are low pressure bias, okay? And oops, the center of this, look at where this is. It's moved east to like 170, so a little bit east of the dateline, okay? With 4 contours holding till the end of the first week of January, 3 contours into the end of February, 2 contours past March, and then you begin the demise. That said, here is the high pressure bias, this dotted contour here over the maritime continent. It's weakening, but you don't see any signs of it in the Pacific of any at all for the foreseeable future. So the El Nino base state is going to hold on and linger and not to be worried. But for sure, El Ninos typically peak out somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We're actually doing pretty well. We're past Christmas. We're past New Year's. Things still looking solid. Piles of momentum in the atmosphere. The storm track, very healthy and looking good. All right, what's going on in the ocean, down in the ocean, not on the surface, but subsurface? This is the Kelvin wave portion of the discussion. We're looking at data from the TAO buoy array, the series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. These little X's there. These are the anchor lines on the buoys. X's are sensors strung down the anchor lines. They collect data. You use a model to fill in the gaps, and you see the profile of warm water. During La Nina, warm water is all piled up here in the west, and you have freezing cold water off the east, driven by nuking trades and strong trades. During El Nino, the opposite happens. Trades relax. You know, these the westerly anomalies we were talking about, they take warm water that's normally here, start pushing it off to the east. We see a clear example of that right now. Here's 30 degrees centigrade, very warm temperatures at 165 west. I think that's where they were last week. The 29 degree isotherm holding steady at about, what is that, 157 or so, but the 28 degree isotherm, which was locked at 140 for like forever. In fact, even a couple days ago, I think it was over at 125. So it's looking really good. And the 24 degree isotherm, almost as deep as it was a little starting maybe about March, down at 50 meters deep. It got down to 60 meters at one point. The point being, lots of warm water filling the entire Pacific. But it's not the actual temperatures. It's the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. You see this clear pattern of 5 degree above normal temperatures, 4 degree, 3 degree. And this is actually an upgrade here from what we saw, I think it was a week ago. There weren't even any 3 degree anomalies out here. That had all withered out, but no, we had another Kelvin wave, another active phase of the MJO in the early December timeframe, which has taken more warm water, pushed it from here, pushing it down at depth, filling this whole area again, and that's all going to push this way. 4 to 5 degree anomalies, that's centigrade. That's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 degrees above Fahrenheit above normal. This is probably a month or more of warm water working its way up to the surface, and then we have more behind that. So El Nino not going anywhere anytime soon. That said, notice cool water is trying to build here off the West Pacific. The beginnings of the demise of El Nino. Not to be concerned, but it is there, and you can't ignore it. Here's another view using satellite data, sort of a mixture, I think, of satellite data and the TAO data we saw above. Basically painting the same picture. Extremely warm water. What is this? This is, I'll count them. I'll do it the hard way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll say 5 or more degree anomalies here, working their way up off of, well, actually erupting at about 110. You see it reaching the surface there, but pretty much erupting in this whole area here from almost to Hawaii, the whole way into Ecuador, and more behind that. Our new Kelvin wave building here. Just a great picture, but you also see this building area of cool water here. At some point, all this warm water is going to tap out, get to the surface, and this cold water is going to back build in and fill, and that will be the start of your La Nina pattern. That said, this looks like at least 3 months of warm water, if not more. Here is the sea level anomaly from December 24th. Why do you care about what's that even mean? It's the height of the ocean, but it's not based so much on wind. A lot of it is based on what's going on down in the ocean surface. Warm water at depth expands. It'll displace the water above it. creating a bump on the ocean surface. Cold water contracts, it'll create a divot. So what are we looking at here? Well, there's Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, the equator there, date line there, New Guinea over there. We see positive anomalies, 0, 5, 10 centimeter anomalies from Ecuador the whole way out to, well, the date line, but the highest of them to 160 west. That's even west of Hawaii. Still a massive pool of warm water here waiting to discharge to the surface, suggesting that this is still fueling El Nino development. Warm water all deep in the Pacific Ocean off of Ecuador, working its way to the surface with probably months of eruption still to go. At some point, it'll start thinning out, but it is the presence of warm water on the ocean surface in this region that really drives the weather pattern change, because you get warm water here off of Peru and Ecuador that's not normally there. That creates evaporation again that goes up in the atmosphere. The jet stream senses that. Things change, and it drives the jet hard over the Pacific, resulting in the sort of storm pattern that we're currently experiencing. Upper ocean heat anomalies, right? That just shows you where the warm water is. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We're going back a year. Cold water off of Ecuador. Your La Nina pattern with all the warm water in the west. Then we had, there's 1 Kelvin wave there in December, 1. Number 2 in January, number 3 in March, number 4 in April, number 5 in May, number 6 in July and August, number 7 in September, number 8 in November, and number 9, you can't see it here yet, but it's clear, it's obviously forming. One last Kelvin wave, 9 in the series over a period of effectively a year. Indeed, and you see the warm water just piling up here off of Ecuador and continuing to erupt off to the east. In fact, this looks stronger than anything we've had here since September and October. A nice little push here. This, again, we think is going to actually feed El Nino even a little bit more as we get into January. We'll get into that in the surface analysis. So here we go. Sea surface temperature anomalies. Surface, not subsurface. We know there's here we go. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, Hawaii, and this is all on the equator. We know there's a huge pool of warm water right here, subsurface, but this is actually looking at the surface. It's not quite all stitched together correct, but you see we have some good pockets of warming here. Much warmer than what was a month ago or so. I think a lot of this is not so much a function that there's a lot of warm water down deep in the ocean, but that there's also westerly anomalies over this. We saw that in previous charts, and that just allows the signature to become a lot more evident. When you get stronger than normal trades here, instead of westerly anomalies, kind of mixes things up and creates some upwelling. It's upwelling warm water, but the signature doesn't like pop out like it does here. We have, if anything, the warm signature has built the past couple of weeks over this entire area, looking very healthy, at least for the moment. That said, we know the inactive phase is coming, and it's going to create easterly anomalies, and this will cool down some. But for right now, a rather healthy, strong El Nino classic pattern indicated. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. It's really here on the equator that we're interested in. Yeah, we get warming east of the Galapagos out to about 140 west. The reality is temperatures are really warm there. They're not going to get a whole lot warmer. They're probably as warm as they're going to get. The game we're playing now is just try to keep those warm temperatures warm. The way they classify El Nino is not what is the single one-day peak temperature. It's what's the average temperature over a 3-month period, a full 3 months, okay? And you classify El Nino by weak, medium, strong, or super El Nino status. Temperatures are about as warm as they're going to get. We'll get into the details there. But for right now, maybe they're getting a little bit warmer for the past couple of days, but we don't expect anything more than that. And the backed off view, classic El Nino pattern. I'm not even looking at how warm all the rest of the Pacific, all the oceans, all the planet's oceans are, but this is classic El Nino right here, and that's what we're focusing on. This is the Nino 1.2 and Nino 3.4 index. Just these are not absolute temperatures. We've come to find that the official El Nino data is actually much warmer than this, but you can at least see the trend of what's going on. Nino 1.2 is right up there by Ecuador and the Galapagos Island. Temperatures right there, actually rising a little bit. Remember, we talked about westerly anomalies setting up over the East Pacific, and I think that's mainly what's happening, plus the fact that we have Kelvin waves erupting like mad. The index 6 and was that 6 1/100th of a degree above normal. Okay. Oh, and when we talked, okay, well, we'll do that down here. The Nino 3.4 index, the official El Nino index. Now, this really speaks to it. Our value at plus 1.697, just eyeballing it on the graph. This is the warmest temperatures have been in the Nino 3.4 region pretty much the entire time of this El Nino. That is encouraging. Actually, the temperatures are much warmer than this, at least 0.2 of a degree, so that would put this at about 1.9 degrees above average. But let's dig a little deeper on this. Here is the Nino 3.4, the official El Nino deviation from normal. So we can see back in August, temperatures were 1.2 degrees above normal, building to 1.5, 1.7. They kind of jump around. This is week by week to 1.8 in November, to 1.9 in mid-November, 2.1. That was the highest weekly reading we've had yet. That was right around Thanksgiving time frame. And then we've been hanging in the basically the 2-degree range. Very, very interested. It's what, January 1st? Where is our data from December 27th? I think it'll probably show up tomorrow. And I'm guessing it'll come in at either 1.9 or 2 degrees. And then the week after that might even come in a little bit higher. Why does that matter? Well, it's about how strong is this El Nino going to end up, all right? Sea surface temperatures that are 0 to half a degree above normal are just considered neutral. Half a degree to 1 degree above normal is weak El Nino, and that's for 3 consecutive months in a row. From 1 degree to 1.5 degrees is moderate El Nino. 1.5 to 2 degrees is strong El Nino, and above 2 degrees is super El Nino. So coming back here, well, we're definitely at, that's 4 months of 2, 4 weeks of 2. And you could probably even say, I think the official reading for November was 2.02 degrees above normal. December seems like a slam dunk that it's going to be some flavor of 2 or even maybe a little bit more above normal. So that is 2 months of 2 degrees, right on the very top edge of strong El Nino, just below super El Nino status. Now, the real question is what's going to happen in January, and will that kind of mess everything up, or will it hold? But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's take a look at ocean currents. All right, so here is the equator right here. This is New Guinea. We have, you can see, a pretty, not as strong as it was, but still a good entrenched westerly current. That's exactly what we want, driven by westerly anomalies here in the West Pacific, making it somewhere to, right around here. I'll put, let's see, where's that? That is 170 west, so a bit east of the date line. Then we'll drag this guy this way. We're going to go look. There's Galapagos, Ecuador. Now you see you have your strong easterly current here. The convergence point looks like it's right about there. That is east and west currents and temperature gradients and the upward draft of your Walker circulation right about in there. Next, we overlay actual sea surface temperatures. You see very warm water the whole way. It's still a machine coming out of the, we'll just do here, the maritime continent. Look at all that warm water getting sucked out over to the Pacific, The leading edge of it now has passed Hawaii. Now, this is a bit, it's only 5 degrees north and south of the equator that really matters. But the leading edge of the warm current is roughly at about 148 west. So warm water moving this way. You still see there's a good amount of warm water here. It's the anomalies that is measured here. So we'll put the anomalies in here. Get rid of that. Here we go. You can see very much warmer than normal water. Here, we'll just do a couple of samples here. That is 3.4 degrees above normal, 2.9, 3.2, 2.2. Now things weaken a little bit out here, 2.3, 2.1. Then you get out here and you're in the 2 degree range, 2.2 degrees. All right, the point being, so the official El Nino monitoring region, where are we? This is 125 degrees north and south of the equator. So that's a line there to there, starting here, and it goes out to 170, which I think is there. Nope, it's there. Okay, so this is our bounding box right in here. Things looking very good. The question is, can we get it to hold the whole way through the month of January, to get us as high as we possibly can, to continue to impart as much energy as possible into the jet stream, to give the jet stream momentum so that the El Nino effects on surf and rain into the U.S. and across the Pacific Basin continue as long as possible. So then what does the atmosphere think is going on? And this is where things get even more convoluted and a bit strange. We start by looking at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Darwin in the Indian Ocean, roughly, more or less. Tahiti in the Pacific Ocean. When there is lower pressure over Tahiti, and we saw the low pressure bias over the dateline, all that, so pressure should be lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative, but it's only like minus 2.63. This guy should be down at like minus 20 or something. And you go back here and you look and you go, well, there we had a good run of, but just a couple of days of negative. And really, it hasn't been all that negative. For a strong El Nino, the signal does not look impressive at all. The 30-day average reflects this. This is your active-inactive state of the MJO. This should be down at like minus 25. What is it? Minus 4.64. And it was, yeah, it was down at minus 7.6. And it was down into the minus 10 range at one point. But this is not what it should look. The 90-day average should be at minus 15. It's minus 6. And has, yeah, it was minus 8.8 at one point. So according to this, the atmosphere doesn't really sense El Nino. But we know that's not true because we were looking at the jet stream, we're looking at the storm track, we see all sorts of things going on. Why is this data anomalous? So I ran into this little jewel. It's from Ben Knoll Weather. You can check him out, his site. And this shows rising air, sinking air. Rising air would be like low pressure. Sinking air would be high pressure. And look at this chart. This is the rising, sinking air pattern from September through November of 2023. And look at this. The sinking air, high pressure, was over the whole South Pacific. Normally, you'd expect to see it like maybe just more over here, but it fills the whole South Pacific, and the low pressure pattern, the way it's actually manifests in the atmosphere, is limited to the North Pacific. That would explain why and where's Tahiti? Tahiti is roughly right around in here somewhere, down, yeah, I'm looking at how this is calibrated. It's basically right here. The point being, if there is high pressure over the South Pacific and the low pressure pattern is limited to the North Pacific, well, that might explain why the Southern Oscillation Index, that previous index we were looking at, is just so fluky and not suggesting that El Nino is really in control. Clearly it is by looking at the weather pattern in the North Pacific. Maybe not so much in terms of rainfall in the Southwest, but in terms of storm pattern in the Pacific, definitely there. The point being, this is a weird El Nino. It's been weird from the beginning. It continues to be weird. I'm not going to sit here and make speculations about why it's weird and what's causing that. But this clearly suggests that there is some weird things going on in the atmosphere. Here's a 30-day moving SOI graphed out. You can see the value here at like -6. You'd think we should be down here at -20 or 25. We're not. You can see the transition from the La Nina pattern, positive values to negative values, but not as negative as we had hoped for. And again, the weirdism that we were talking about appears to be in effect. And then finally, the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomaly forecast from the CFS model. This model shows temperatures, well, this is mid-October, mid-January, so that'd be mid-November, mid-December right there. Temperatures supposedly peaked out in mid-December. Here we are, January 1st, and we're still hovering somewhere around here, and I think we're going to hover around this out into January. So we're going to have November, December, and January all in about the 1.9 to 2 degree range. Now, this model shows temperatures falling off a cliff, and I think a lot of that is driven by those easterly anomalies that are now starting to take over the equatorial East Pacific. But we're at January 1st, which is, well, that's mid-December there. So we're halfway here, and that's still, this drop-off hasn't happened. And I wouldn't be surprised if we still hang at about 1.9 into January 15th. Then we're going to fall off for sure. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how crazy the forecast is from the CFS model and whether it really has a grip on reality or not at all. It's going to be most interesting, but based on the data I'm seeing, I think temperatures are going to stay warmer than what this model suggests, at least for another 2 weeks. We'll see. I'm hoping it holds. All right, so let's wrap this all up, put a bow on it. Right now, model's looking very solid. 3 storms forecast for the North Pacific with swells of a more northerly angle forecast for the next 2 weeks, something like that. And the storm track pushed a bit more to the north, driven mainly by the inactive phase of the MJO. Sea surface temperatures very warm and looking to hold hopefully for 2 more weeks. That'll get us maybe right at the hairy edge as the upper end of a strong El Nino status, beating out what the CFS model projected. Maybe the CFS has a trick up its sleeve that we don't know and it knows something we don't. But I'm kind of sensing that maybe it doesn't. This will be interesting to watch for the next 2 weeks. Anyway, the active phase of the MJO forecast to move in as we get into mid-January, and then theoretically the storm track falls farther south again, and then we get back into our more westerly angled swell pattern. The other side of this is it looks like snow is forecast now for Tahoe, and my guess is that's all going to bleed into Utah and into Colorado as well, and hopefully rain making its way across the southern tier states. We'll see how long that holds, but at least the trend looks like it's moving in the right direction, and not to be too concerned. I mean, typically, I say the start of the ski season in California starts about January 9th. It looks like we're going to be right on track with that almost to the day. So things looking very good for now. We know long-term La Nina is coming, but the longer and the stronger this El Nino is, the longer its effects will hold on the jet stream, and the longer we'll get a better storm track and surf potential going through the spring and even into the summer and maybe into the early part of fall of this year. So right now, things looking pretty good. I hope you all had a great new year and a very happy holidays. We're now into the new year. Things are looking good. We have passed the La Nina dead zone, that whole year of no good surf, and things are looking better. All right, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you have a comment or question, write it up. Please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you'd like to make a small donation to the cause, we'd appreciate it. Just use the special thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. And with that, we are done for this evening. Go get some waves, be safe, have fun, and pray for snow. It looks like it's coming. This is all looking very positive. Happy New Year.